Welcome back. You are listening to another episode of the Keep the Change podcast, and it's been a long time coming. A very special episode today. You're going to get to find out how annoying I am and all sorts of different things, because we've got Phil Smith, my business partner, sitting across from me today. Mate, how good is this?
Mate, it's quite a different environment compared to our little humble office that we've got, but it's a privilege to get the call up to come and be part of Keep the Change podcast.
Well, some people will be familiar with Phil's voice already if they see some Next Advisory socials or the What's Next podcast, which was started before the Keep the Change podcast as well, but probably more specifically targeted towards business owners. But a number of you will be familiar with our ramblings on in the business space. But a big question from people recently has been around buying businesses and how that works. And Phil does a lot of work in this space and has over the years around helping people who want to buy a business. So in an effort to do a bit more content around how that works, thought we'll sit down, pick your brains over a little 2-part series and see if we can convert some people from maybe corporate corpses to buying a business.
Yeah, or even better, ditching the dream of the house and buy a business.
Oh, don't get me going too much. But I guess what would be handy to start with is maybe just walking people through what they ask when they come to you initially around, I think I want to buy a business, what do I need to collect? Because I've overheard a number of the phone calls and there's often a few missing pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and no two phone calls are ever identical because everybody's coming from a different background and every business is different. But broadly, let's assume that you've found a business that you're interested in, because I think even before you find the business that you're interested in, there's a whole nother chapter that goes before that of actually going and finding out the type of business that you're interested in. And, you know, in terms of industries and the type of work and how it's structured, whether you want to go into that or not, we can come back to. But the process typically would involve, firstly, how much is the business worth? Establish, is what the prospective or what the vendor is asking for, is it reasonable? More often than not, from what we see, the values are pretty much okay. And as with everything, just like buying a house, it's up for negotiation. You can get that checked by doing a valuation. Then at that stage, you'd typically be looking at putting an offer together. So again, not too dissimilar to buying a house where there's a sale and purchase agreement. There's one for a business. But with buying a business, it looks a little bit different. We're not buying a house, we're buying assets that are split between physical assets and intangible or non-physical assets. And once that purchase price has been agreed, you then go into what's called the due diligence process. And that's the period of time that you've basically got to get your crew of experts around you. So it's lawyers, accountants, bankers, any other specialists to do a deep dive into the business, look under the hood and go, what's this business actually on about? Do the numbers stack up? What's the story that the numbers are telling? Because typically when somebody buys a business, they're not number nerds like an accountant. So they're not going to be able to look at it and go, geez, is this good? Or what does that mean? It's got gross profit of 32% this year and then it's got gross profit of 27% the following year. What does that mean? Salaries, for example, to shareholders, it might be big one year, it might be small the next. Why? So we go into starting to uncover some of those little rocks and tell the story behind the numbers to basically say to the prospective purchaser, you, the listener, hey, this is what we can see financially from the business, but also here's some non-financial risks as well as financial risks, and at the same time, here's some opportunity. The whole purpose of due diligence is not to give you, yes, you should buy this or no, you shouldn't. Ultimately, that decision's got to be made by the purchaser. But at the end of the day, basically a really detailed report to give you some level of comfort that you've engaged the right people to answer the questions that you don't know how to find the answers to.
Nice. because when you make the offer, you make it subject to due diligence, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably similar to going back to buying a house. A lot of people will say subject to a builder's report or inspection
Spot on.
or whatnot. So you're basically making an offer of intent that you're keen to buy the business, but you still want your time. Is it normally 20 days?
20 days minimum working days. So again, this is, I suppose, where, like buying a house, the process is somewhat similar, but it actually takes longer because property in New Zealand is so much more liquid because we love a property. You can list it and have it sold within, if the property market's boiling, within a matter of days or weeks. But in times like now, maybe 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
With a business, it could be different. We've seen information memorandums, so that's the initial booklet that the broker will have prepared by the vendor. All the pretty pictures, we can come back to that later. We've seen some businesses that have been on the market for up to a year, sometimes over a year. So that's a business owner on the other side, a seller, vendor, that's wanting out. They want to sell, but no one wants to buy.
Yeah.
And it's either the right purchaser isn't in the market. There might be other circumstances surrounding it. They might be asking for too much. It could be a niche industry, but it's not like a house, and it does take some time. And the same happens through that due diligence phase, or if you're buying your house, getting the builder's report, getting legal advice, you can get that knocked off within a week sometimes in a house. With a business, you're 20 working days, absolute bare minimum. In our experience, you can typically get an extension because when you're hot on buying a business, it's not often that there's going to be another backup offer like there is with a house.
Yeah.
So the broker and the vendor are going to want to nurture you as the purchaser to go, yep, let's keep ticking this along to make sure that we can get this deal across the line. So yeah, once due diligence is done and you've got all your information, then you're basically going to go, yep, we've satisfied due diligence. Like with a house, you'd probably want to make it subject to finance as well. And then you're going to want to go off and talk to a bank and make sure you got the number side of the equation stacked up.
So team typically that you'd be pulling together for that DD due diligence period would be a grunty accountant that isn't not always just your standard compliance accountant that has some experience in this space, right? And then lawyer, and then banking kind of, but sits in the finance camp, right?
Yeah, and then even on the lawyer, like you referenced the accountant, not your typical kind of compliance accountant who does accounts and tax returns, kind of similar with lawyers as well. You don't want somebody that just does conveyancing, which is, if you're going and buying and selling houses, that's not the type of lawyer that you want to use. You want somebody that's got some commercial nous or acumen that is able to review contracts, highlight risk, and be able to tell you absolutely everything. Because if you're buying a business that's got a lease and any employees and that kind of thing, the lawyer's going to go through all of those documents and tell you warts and all what you're up for, to make sure that you're going into it eyes wide open and going, oh, gee, I didn't realize that on this lease we're only just at the beginning of an 8-year term and there's a personal guarantee attached to it, or that you've got 5 employees and there's all these entitlements that they're that they've got that a standard employment agreement potentially doesn't have. So that's really where a lawyer can add value. The other one would be is if you're buying, and it's not incredibly often, we've had it once where a client's purchased a business and it's in a specialist industry where there's some real technical pieces of equipment. We can't do due diligence on that because we're only good with numbers. A lawyer, probably the same thing, pretty good at reading, not much else maybe. And that's where you need somebody that's a specialist with equipment to basically come in, assess the state of the equipment and go, is it worth what they're saying it's worth in the sale and purchase agreement, and what's the state of it? Is there any deferred repairs and maintenance? Is there any issues with the stuff and being able to get them serviced? If it's an international piece of machinery, you've got it in New Zealand, we can be pretty isolated here. If you've got to get parts from Europe. So all of those kind of things to then factor into going, well, if you're producing something and this piece of machinery breaks down, how long are you going to be out of action for, and how do you manage that risk?
Yeah. I guess that's the little things that you don't know that you don't even know until you get started on a journey like this though, right?
100%.
Because I think even when you're talking about that, people wouldn't even think about employee contracts, lease term. So then are they buying into a business that has to keep that lease? Can they get out of that lease? and what are the rest of the conditions. But a lawyer will go through all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess the scary thing, though, is then that's going to come with cost if you don't then decide to go through with the business purchase, right?
Yeah, quite right. You've got to be pretty keen to go, yep, this business has got a stack load of merits on it. And due diligence is a form of insurance. It's like going, well, I take out insurance on my car in the case that I crash it. Doing due diligence is not too dissimilar. I'm going to pay or invest in legal expertise and accounting expertise to go, what are the risks to go, well, I'm potentially looking at spending $500,000 or $1 million on buying a business. How can I make sure that this isn't a dud? I'll go and spend whatever it is to make sure that it stacks up, and be quite prepared that after you've spent 5, 10, 15, 20, the numbers can be quite scary on due diligence depending on the complexity and size of the business, to walk away from it. Because the biggest thing that you haven't touched on, which I'm surprised you haven't so far, is the emotional attachment.
Yeah.
And every single prospective business owner that we talk to, that is saying, oh, hey, Luke and Phil, we've got this business that we're really interested in, da-da-da-da-da. And you go, oh, that's great. And you feel their excitement and their energy. And the hook in the back of our minds is always, what's the emotional attachment to this?
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to remove that emotional attachment, so unhook them from it and go, we only work on reality and data. And if it's not backed up by that, we've got to strip out the emotion. And if the reality of the situation and the data and the advice basically is saying, man, red flag, you got to be prepared to walk away from it. As hard as emotionally that could be,
yeah,
it's just one of those things. And it could save you $500,000, $1 million.
As an example, this is not a real example, but to put it into a story of an example of that is that you might have somebody who brings in information memorandum to Phil, and they are really keen on a luggage business. They decide that they would love this.
Yes.
And then all of the numbers are suggesting that sales are decreasing and that they're struggling to get supply for the luggage. The margin is tightening up. There's a new competitor into the market. They can't see all of that because all they can see is, I love travel.
Yeah.
This would be a great business.
Yep. So I can get my luggage and I can take it. I can go on tax-deductible trips overseas to test my luggage to make sure that the conveyor belts aren't going to munt it up and that it's going to fit in the overhead locker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And can I? How much can of what does 7 kilos of luggage look like in my carry-on and the different styles? So I've taken the pink one to the Gold Coast. Right. I've got a yellow one now, and I've got to go out to Fiji and test that one out. That's so much of an emotional attachment, and you've got to strip that away and come back to the data, like you said before. And if the data year after year is showing a trend that sales are declining and your gross profit or your margins are reducing in percentage terms, there's going to be alarm bells there, and you've got to look at it and go, oh, gee, nah, this isn't for us.
Or it could even be that the supplier has had a contract with that business for 7 years, and it's only got 3 years to run. And you think, 3 years is still heaps of time, but the lawyer is probably going to point out to you, and someone like Phil doing due diligence is going to suggest, well, what happens at the end of that 3 years?
Spot on.
And you may not ask that question, or you might take the risk that it's just going to roll around again. But effectively, if you don't renew that contract, you might have invested all this cash into a business, brought them out, and end up being left with nothing.
In 3 years' time, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
In a big, big way. Hey, but if you put that money into a house, at least you have the house.
Especially in Auckland. Yeah. This is not financial advice, but if you need Bitcoin as well. No. It's all those little things, right, that actually make buying a business hard and scary. However, just like anything, you're not going to have that knowledge, and that's why you need a smart team around you. But we've seen business owners themselves use no team and buy businesses, right, and go, righto, like I don't need any due diligence done. I feel like I've got a good handle on this, no lawyer involved, and they are happy to go and do a deal and buy a business off someone.
Yeah. And then they come along and go, oh, yeah, can you do, then we're engaged as the accountants for that, and you get into it and you're just like, man, why did you buy this? And I mean, it's too late. The horse is bolted. But I think the point that you touch on is it can be a really long process. And going back a step further is there's a big education gap there. And I guess that's what the whole purpose of this podcast is around education. And I think if owning or being a business owner is something that you want to do, there's nothing stopping you now about learning about the journey. And there's a stack load of resources out there, whether you're watching YouTube videos, you're reading online, you're talking to other business owners, talk to lawyers, talk to accountants. The other one, which is probably the real insightful one, would be, and it's from a recent phone call, I said it to somebody else and they were absolutely surprised, was get in touch with business brokers. Let them know that you're an interested business owner and say, hey, look, flick me information memorandums. Businesses, like houses, are always coming up for sale. Probably not as frequent as a house, but they're always coming on the market. And if there's business brokers out there that know that you're interested, they will email you the information memorandums as they come through. Now, to further refine that, I'd go back another step and suggest, what is it about business that you like? More often than not, for a few people, there's a romantic notion attached with being a business owner. And I don't know what it is. Maybe people look at it that it's this utopia with rose-tinted glasses and all of a sudden you become a business owner and you've got $1 million in the bank. It doesn't work like that. The realities of being a business owner is you wearing multiple hats and you don't switch off. It's tough. And you're out there forging a path with the shovel in hand, blisters on those hands, just carving. Because no one else is going to do it for you. And you've either got it or you don't. So understand what's involved about running a business first and then niche that down further. Go, what industries are you excited about? Or what skills do you think that you have in a particular industry that could then become a business? Hospitality, tourism, could be agriculture, could be manufacturing. There's stack loads out there, professional services, e-commerce. The list goes on and on and on about the different types of businesses that are available. But I think if you niche down to a particular type of industry and then you go to a business broker, for example, and say, hey, look, Mr. Business Broker, I'm interested in buying a business that's in hospitality because I've got skills that attach to that. Not that I like food because that's emotional. I've got skills that I can add to the hospitality industry.
You're a chef, as an example.
Yep. Or you've previously managed a restaurant, or you've worked as a waiter and then you've had management experience in hospitality, so you understand how those businesses work, and they're blooming tough.
Not just, I've been to that cafe or restaurant, I love it, it's great, I reckon I could make it way better.
Yeah, 100%. So you go into a business broker with really specific context of what it is that you're looking for, and I would wrap a budget around it as well. Say, look, flick me businesses that are between $250,000 and $1 million. So that really niches it down. So you're not wasting anyone's time. In the hospitality space, there will be heaps. You'll get information memorandums
every day,
daily, if not hourly. Or on the flip side of it, same industry, but you want to say to them, I'm only interested in businesses that are between $1 and $3 million. That's refining it even further. They'll flick you the IMs. Then you're going to start and read them. Yes, before you get the information memorandum, you're going to have to sign confidentiality agreements to make sure that you're not sharing that information with the world at large. Yeah. But you're getting those documents and you're reading them. And the more of them you read, the better your understanding is going to be around what's coming up for sale, where they're coming up for sale, how much they're asking for, the stories that they're telling. Kind of like, well, I suppose, again, using the house thing as an example, you'll go and look at 5, 6, 10, 12 different houses before you pick one that you want to buy. A business is no different. You're going to look at dozens and dozens and dozens of information memorandums before you find one and you go, yep, this is the one that I want to actually make an offer on and go down the due diligence path. Just to backtrack even further, even before you get to due diligence, there's actually a fair bit of work you can do yourself. You can get the IM and just start talking to the broker. More often than not, they'll let you have a yarn with the vendor, and there might be phone calls and whatnot. Then you can get that vibe check and start and ask some cheeky questions and go yep or nah. And if it's a yep, we carry on. If it's a nah, shelve it, wait for the next one.
Geez, you've got a stack of thoughts about to come at you, mate, after that. So, yeah, I guess I'm trying to put myself into the shoes of someone who may want to do this. I would, from what I'm picking up, I'd be calling a link, for instance, or an ABC.
Yep.
Or our mates,
business brokers. Yep.
Kakapo.
Yeah. Yep.
As an example. So then, basically, in summary, you want to get in the arena.
100%.
And then ask for some information memorandums, which are packages of here's a business for sale, here's all the high-level data. Now, be careful, because what we've come across a number of times is people think that getting their information memorandum is doing the due diligence. They've said to us before, oh yeah, I've done my DD, I've done my due diligence, I've read the information memorandum. There can be a whole lot of stuff. It's basically like buying a vehicle, but in just getting a report given to you of what it's like, not test driving it, not looking under the hood, not checking anything, or even giving it to the AA to have a look at and go, oh shit, did you know about this? That's probably not going to be in there. So the journey you're going to have to go on is actually learn the language of some of this stuff and accept that you don't know it. That's fine. So if it were me, I would then think, this is what I've learned over the years, what's the fastest way to learn something? Go to someone who's done it.
Yeah.
So then I would accept, okay, well, if I want to do it faster, I don't want to try and figure it all out myself. So you could even post on social media, for instance, and say, I'm looking for someone who's brought a business. Do you know anyone? I'm keen to learn how it works. And I could guarantee you that if someone sees that has brought a business, they will be so keen to unload on you some of their war stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the amount of people that have gone through that process and then want to sing from the treetops about what they've done.
Yeah.
And they will tell you warts and all about the process.
And they're going to then give you some insights as well, so then you can learn from them. But even thinking about why is it that you want to do it? Because I guess one thing we haven't touched on is we've seen a massive uptick on this, through COVID. We were actually trying to work this out in the office the other day of what we think it might be. But through COVID, it seemed like people were realising what their properties were worth and thinking if they had multiple rental properties, you know what, I might get out of the corporate role and I might sell down one of these properties or put it up as security and I can buy a business outright or with minimal debt.
I thought you were about to say they were going to bin the job and become professional landlords and buy more properties. Okay.
I think they'd tried that and they might have had 2 or 3, and so we're sort of sitting there going, oh, okay, this does seem like a no-brainer then. Flick off one of them, free up some cash, you got less debt, and then maybe go off and buy a business. But those people... some of those people, let's say, were probably looking at businesses where they were overly emotionally invested in them, right?
Yeah.
Now interest rates are higher again, and I wonder if part of it is people going, right, I want to buy a business because my job is hard. I don't know if I want to do this forever. Maybe I do need to be able to increase my income. It seems like I'm not going to be able to ask for a pay rise at the moment. So I guess you want to be very careful that a business is not your shiny object. And that you just think, right, this is a fad, because you're going to waste people's time, brokers, bankers, lawyers. You're going to run up bills. You're going to build a bad name for yourself if you can't pay those bills. So like Phil said before, be very certain that this is actually something that you want to explore and then commit to learning the language. Just like if you were trying to learn how to speak Italian, for instance, you're either going to try and learn it, you can get in the arena and figure that out, and you're going to commit to it, or you're going to half-ass around and piss people off signing up to Italian courses but not getting them. You can pay $9 to get the app on your phone or whatever, but are you actually going to use it? So think about why it is that you want to look at businesses, and then the sorts of ones that you do like, and then start getting into the arena and collecting some of this information from people that we're actually willing to help you.
Yeah, spot on, mate.
Simple as that. The other thing that we touched on before coming in here was, I wonder if it's that the boomers don't do content, right? So what we've seen for years is all these sexy stories about this tech startup and, these glorified headlines of old mate started this business and scaled it to this and it sold for millions, and we instantly think, oh, maybe that's the path rather than property. But realistically, 71% of businesses are one person. So there isn't actually that many businesses that you could even buy. Because what we see a little bit of as well is people going to sell their business, but it is actually just them. right?
Yeah, and I guess the example that you've used there would be those are the unicorns, right? The ones that grab the headlines, the 1 in a million, 1 in a billion businesses where it's started as something small and scaled to be something where they're doing multiples that are just completely unheard of. That's not normal. And by normal, when we're talking about SMEs, so small and medium-sized businesses in New Zealand, they do have a range, and I'm getting into valuation stuff here a little bit, but a range of multiples that they go for on the sale price. So if you're on the flip side and trying to sell your business and you think, oh, again, the emotional attachment, it's probably not worth what you think it is. Because the multiples that get the headlines are what actually distorts the reality of what's going on.
Yeah, we often see businesses, whether they are clients or people just through passing commentary, seems to be with a business, if you say, oh, what do you think your property's worth? $1 million becomes the figure, right?
Yeah.
That's just the figure that gets plucked out.
And it's funny, you ask somebody what their house is worth or what they think a house is worth, boom, they'll give you the answer within 3 to 5 seconds. You say to them, what do you think your business is worth? And protracted pause.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, start scratching. And then go, oh, what's my profit? Oh, where do I find that? Oh, then the multiple. Oh, all businesses are multiplied by 3, aren't they? And then you start going down this path. The other thing that's just come into my mind when we talk about businesses is a business versus a franchise. That's something we haven't touched on. A franchise is still a business. It's just a different way of running a business. You're really going to need to level up on your legal expertise or legal involvement if you're buying a franchise, because there's going to be a stack load of agreements and contracts sitting in the background that you're going to need to be really familiar with that come with buying a franchise.
Yeah. Franchise, effectively you're buying systems, including marketing, documentation, how they do things, probably some lead flow as well, some support, some mentoring, if it's a well set up franchise. But in return, you will be paying a percentage of your revenue for them to do that for you, and you'll also be paying a franchise fee up front. It could be that that's maybe the step into it for somebody as they go and have a crack at that and figure out, is this it? It's the hybrid between a job and owning a business. And then you might get 5 years down the path, and that's not actually that long in a lifetime, especially if you don't like what you're doing anyway, to then realise, I think I'm a business owner, not a franchise owner. I might go out there and have a crack. But yeah, it's not easy, and you have to figure out so much stuff for you. So I think even looking at buying a business is going to teach you whether you've got what it takes to even start thinking about running it once you do own it anyway, because there will be so much stuff outside of the information memorandum and even the due diligence that you just can't foresee. Because realistically, you could get a great IM, information memorandum, do some awesome due diligence as well, be certain this is the business. Week one of your key staff members, for instance, is just like, you seem like a dick. What's the soonest I can get out of you?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're into that mode of basically, right, this is not what I thought I was getting myself into. So you almost can't expect it to go perfectly right. I think on the flip side, to the people who think their business is worth $1 million, the sad thing is business owners who do have quite a nice wee business, but they think it's worth nothing and they're ready to close it down. And we see that our client base is a lot of not new, but newer type business owners compared to the aging demographic of business owners. But this also represents a massive opportunity for Kiwis to buy into businesses, because going back to what I was saying before, we've glorified the startups and the tech and the massive multiples, and it didn't even have any bloody profit yet, but it's sold for 20x. It's EBITDA and all this stuff, and how does that even work? But
the example there would be Xero. For years and years and years, they were smacking out losses.
Yeah.
Loss after loss after loss, yet their share price still kept climbing. And you're kind of like, why would you invest in a business that's losing money? Doesn't make sense. Needless to say, I didn't buy in, kicking myself.
Yeah. So you have to understand the bigger play that might be happening there. But for a lot of bread and butter businesses that the boomers have had over the years, they actually have really good, fundamentally sound businesses, and you might get an information memorandum and realise, wow, this is actually highly profitable. And one thing that I would be challenging myself on, much like you said before, is if it's an industry you do like, how can you add value to it? Because remember, you could buy a business and then you could add value to it and then sell it at a later date as well, and hopefully get out without a capital gains tax. Depending on how long it takes. It's probably got about 3 years. Yeah.
We don't want to go down that path.
Yeah. But remember that it's an asset that you're buying, and then it's an asset that you are selling. And at the moment, we don't have a capital gains tax. So if you're not buying it with an intention to resell, you're probably not going to have to pay tax on that. But ultimately, you want to be going into a business anyway, and not just, I think something we see often is people look at a business and go, I could do it way better, and I'd know a bit about marketing, and I'd do this and I'd do that. But if you can look at it through a lens of how could I make this business more valuable, rather than just I could tap into some of this opportunity and maybe increase the revenue, could you digitize it? You know, could you add some processes in? And everybody would be familiar with this if they have someone they know in their life that is a little bit later in their life in business, and they still do things via paper, or they don't believe in an online booking system or whatever. And those are the sorts of businesses that you are probably going to be able to pay less for, because it's not worth what the business owner thinks it is, but they're tired, they've had enough, and they want to get out, and they want to secure the next stage of their life. And you could potentially realize a lot of money in a deal like that, because you can then go in, add value, bring it up to 2024 and beyond, and then look to just then live off the profits that come out of it, or resell it if you want to as well. So you've got to have some form of strategy from the start of where you're going with it.
Spot on. And I think that's something that business owners, I suppose it's getting a little bit away from buying a business, but once you've actually got the business, it is an asset. And it's surprising to see how often business owners neglect that asset. Like, again, you used an example of a house. Like, we don't neglect our houses. We mow the lawns typically. You'll keep the windows clean, the gutters clean. You'll paint it. You'll look after it. You'll nurture it, because you know it's an asset, and you're one day going to want to sell it. And typically, most Kiwis, by and large, are proud of their houses. You want to drive past and go, yeah, that's our digs. Look at us. Da 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 da. A business is no different. You know, you need to take care of it. You need to nurture it so that you preserve that value and grow that value, so that ultimately, when you want to sell it, you're going to sell it for more than what you paid for it.
And it's no different to people who have a business of flipping property. Usually they're going in trying to pay less than what the market value may be, so that they make money straight away, and then they go, right, how can we add value to this? In businesses, same thing. The technology, much like a property, is going to change. Well, you know what? We probably don't need condensation and wooden windows in this. We're going to have to bite the bullet and upgrade into some more modern day technology in this house in terms of different framing and stuff like that, or ventilation systems and things. And a lot of businesses don't want to do that, because they're so tired and busy doing everything else in their business that you say to them, right, let's move you to a new digital system. They'll be like, I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
You know, at an older age. And there's going to be a lot of people taking businesses to the market over the next 10 years and probably beyond.
Well, those boomers, they're going to want to release that cash at some stage.
So it might not even be that you want to do this now, but you might want to do it in the future. So get around some knowledge of people who are out there and have done it. And it might even be, learning on YouTube from American content, for instance, because there's probably more from them than Kiwi business owners or purchasers talking about it, because you have to be pretty niche to go, right, I'm going to make a whole stack of content around buying and selling businesses, unless it was something that you do. But in America, I'd say it's more common. Just be mindful of the fact that their tax rules and just everything's a lot different here, and the scale of business over there.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, sometimes Phil and I are like, should we move? should we go play over there and see what it's like?
Yeah.
But, you can still learn some of the principles from them, and it might even be trying to understand how to read an IM, so that you can get some runs on the board that way.
Yeah, and I think just touching on the IM again, when you're reading that, be mindful of the emotive language that's put in there. The real funny thing to do, or that I like to do when reading an IM, is how much of the IM is left by the time you strip out the stock images and all the fluffy language. So then we're dealing with data and reality and facts. And some of the ones that I've seen, I reckon you could condense down to 1 or 2 pages, not 20 odd pages, just because they're just completely fattened out with fluff. And read into it what you want, but from my point of view, it's just like, well, why do you feel you need to pad all of this out? You wouldn't need to if there was actual genuine substance there. So yeah, be mindful of that. The seller, the vendor's always going to be pushing the upside, and they're going to have rose-tinted glasses on. The brokers are going to know that as a purchaser, you're coming in with an emotional attachment to it, and you'll be like, oh, yep, no, I want to get into hospo because I like food, and, you know, I like going to all these fine dining places, and I want to do the same in business, da-da-da-da. They've got you on the hook. They know your emotional attachment, so they'll be able to sell you your dream. And you're skipping over all of the fundamentals of data and facts to then go, no, this is actually a lemon. Not something that's, you know, a nice piece of roast beef.
I guess one thing we haven't gotten too deep on, and we can in part 2 as well, but you actually need to understand your own position of whether you can even buy a business, right? So what your financial situation is. And the example before was those people that were coming to us during lockdown, and they knew they could because they could see that what their properties were worth and properties were still moving quickly, and they could sell that and realise the cash and go, right, we've got plenty of cash here. But there are many ways to skin a cat of buying a business, right?
Oh, man, that could be a podcast on its own. Typically, buying a business, so going back a few steps, I suppose, buying a business is going to cost you a lot more than actually what you think it does to start with, because it's not just the purchase price or the due diligence. There's all of the, let's assume you've bought the business, and on day one, you're going to need money to pay bills. Because your customers are going to probably pay you on the 20th, because that's how New Zealand works. Yes, it's still yuck, but you're going to have staff and they're going to want to get paid. Where's that money going to come from?
Yeah, that'd be one of the number one things people forget.
100%.
Yeah,
definitely. And then when you start working through the cash flow planning and forecasting piece with them, people are just like, oh shit. So the $1 million that I've got to buy the business, you're now telling me I need to come up with another $100,000 or $200,000 to be able to pay the bills and keep the machinery working. We're like, yep, you didn't think about that? No, like, nah.
Broker didn't mention that.
Nah. So, yeah, the finance piece, golden rule, it's going to cost you a lot more than what you think it is. The second part of it would be, you can pay for a business in a gazillion different ways. And like you said before, that cat can be skinned multiple different ways. You're either paying it with cash. Can't say we've seen many of those.
No.
Banks, as always, they love a bit of bricks and mortar security. You've got a house, you'll be able to buy a business, folks.
Yeah.
Sick, I know. Yes, you can buy a business without owning a house. So a bank could do what is referred in the industry to a cash flow lens. So that's where the business has got proven financial performance, that it spits out consistent cash flow, that it can service the debt, and the risk is reasonably low. Or it's a mixture of cash flow and you're buying assets. So it might be quite a machinery-intensive business purchase. The bank could go, well, we're quite prepared to lend on those particular pieces of equipment. We understand the risk. Yep, not a problem. I suppose compared to a house, you know, what, you can buy a house with a 10% deposit, 90% debt. I don't know what the ratios are these days. Rentals, is it 80-20?
Can't keep up.
Yeah, no, I can't keep up. Commercial property, I think 60-40. Buying a business is completely different again. If you don't have any security to put up for the bank, it's going to be really hard to get across the line. Most ones that we see, the business purchaser, so our client, is using their house or a batch or some other asset as security to help get the deal across the line.
Yeah. And then there is, I guess, the option where you may be able to use vendor finance, right, which is then different again.
Yeah, so again, if you don't have the cash or you don't want to go to the bank, the vendor might go, hey, look, you pay me a deposit, and then the balance of the purchase price you can pay off over 2, 3, 5 years' time, whatever it is, and it's like another form of a loan, and you just set up your repayment terms.
Yeah.
Is there going to be interest charged on it? Is there not? Da-da-da-da-da.
And those payments may actually be able to come out of the profit of the business as you go, if it's profitable enough.
Yep, you can use dividends.
But then you're going to need to live off of something. So you need to think about, if you're going to try and go down that path, what that actually practically looks like. And even just getting yourself business purchase ready by trying to tidy up some of your own financial stuff. So whether that's getting your debt down, making sure that you've got as minimal outgoings as possible. Is there a lever that you can pull? Can you go and live with family, for instance, for a few years, if that's then going to give you a bit of flexibility, or is that going to cost you more than what the payments are anyway, in different forms? But actually thinking about some of this stuff, because you will be surprised when you get into it, the different ways that you can get access to finance, just like every other area of the world, right? You want a new pair of shoes, there's a way to finance it. You want a business, there's a way to finance it.
I mean, at the end of the day, buying and selling businesses, it's an illiquid market. So small and medium-sized businesses, unlike massive listed companies, like you could go and buy shares in Air New Zealand today, and that transaction will clear in 2 or 3 days, and you've all of a sudden got a percentage of that company. And then you decide next week, you know what, I'm sick of owning Air New Zealand, I'm going to sell it. That's a very liquid market because there's ready available buyers and sellers. Housing, probably not as liquid as the share market, but the small and medium-sized businesses, man, there's not often that a business will come up and there's a willing buyer out there on the other side. So when the vendor knows that there's somebody that's hot to trot that's come along, part of getting a deal across the line could be that vendor finance to give them terms to go, right, I'm freeing up my business, I'm getting the outcome that I'm looking for, but to achieve that, I've got to leave something in it by way of vendor finance.
Going back to that stat of 71% of businesses are one person, you then have to think as well, what are you like at managing people? Because if you were to buy a business that has staff, then you're going to have that skill set as well. So it's such a broad topic because everybody will have a different type of business that they may like to run. But you've then got to think, okay, say I can afford to buy it and how that works and whether I want to buy it, then what skills don't I have to try and run a business like that? What am I going to have to learn? Is it people management? Is it around structure? Is it around actually strategy? Is it around exporting into new markets, for instance? So the purchase of the business is still, that's a big learning curve, but it's still step one. Because then you're into, okay, how do I make this work?
Yeah, you day one, week one, it's going to feel like day one, week one for the next 6 months, 12 months, where it's going to be probably tough, particularly if you've come from, that corporate corpses line that you rolled before, where you probably got to a really senior level, maybe even you're a C-suiter.
Oh, baby.
We love that term. And you've gone, you know what, I've clocked it in the corporate world because I've got that C-suite in my name, so I can go out and I can run a business. Well, newsflash, chances are you don't know everything, and you're going to get some real tough lessons when you go out and you run a business, and there's going to be stuff that happens in business that you didn't know actually happens in the small and medium-sized space that you just don't have visibility of or exposure to in the corporate world.
Month one, you don't get paid. Hey, can we get Sally to chase that up?
Or month two, sometimes even month three. But I think the theme there that you're touching on, not only with upskilling yourself at the beginning of the journey about buying a business, I think once you become a business owner, just continuously leveling up on your education and going, where are my gaps? What do I need to learn? How can I get better?
Definitely, yeah. The last thing, mate, and then we'll get into some specifics, some questions that people asked, but a little bit of chat around valuations, because you touched on it very briefly before, but how does someone check whether what a vendor thinks a business is worth to them is actually worth that? What can they do?
Oh, gee.
Again, another podcast topic in its own. But
it's so big and my mind's just absolutely spinning on all the different pieces in there and where to start. I guess that business in isolation, it's going to be tough to know without going and seeking external support. So if you're looking at it, I would be going, right, let's have a look at half a dozen or a dozen different businesses and let's see what values they stack up at, and then compare each of them. And then you'd be able to go, right, well, for the profit that this one's spitting out, they're asking for this much. But for this business over here, it's spitting out a different profit and they're asking for a different number. Why? And start and learn what are some of the things that drive a business value. Then you'll be able to go, from what I know about these two different businesses and the industries that they operate in, assuming that they're different industries, does one seem better value than the other? Then you'll start and build up that kind of gut intuition feel around, yep, okay, that seems reasonable, or, oh no, these numbers feel a bit off. The next step would be, okay, this business looks like a goer, I'll go off and get it valued. And that's where you'd go and seek out a business valuer. So some accountants can do it. nextAdvisory can, selfless plug. And go and get it valued. And that's where, again, like due diligence, there's a bit of a deep dive behind the historic numbers and, if possible, a forecast, so looking forward, and then understanding some of the background, future focus, what are some of the risks and opportunities in the business. So trying to high level tell the story that the numbers are putting on the page. And then we work out from that, what's the cash that this business spits out on an ongoing basis that's sustainable. So that's after you've paid, it's not net profit and it's not EBITDA, it's cash. So after we've taken into account your interest, your tax, we've taken into account future capex that you need to allow for, because that's going to take up some form of cash, what's left, because ultimately what's left after all that's said and done, that's what's available to the shareholder to be distributed as earnings. And if there's consistency of cash over a period of time, that's ultimately what's going to drive the value of the business. And again, depending on the industry and other economic factors, the multiple that is going to be applied to that rate of cash will change. But yeah, we're looking at cash multiplied by risk is going to give you value.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
But it's another tool that you may need to use, right? So you may need someone in your team that can do that part of it, because you've done a number of pieces of work in that space where the sale price or vendor's expected price doesn't even come close to what the true value, of how you'd do a calculation or others would do a calculation.
Yeah, so to illustrate absolute worst case I think that we've ever seen, this is going back quite a few years, there was a business that was for sale for I want to say about 3.5 million. And we looked at the numbers high level and I'm just like, this does not stack up. There's something you can, yes, with our numbers background, you can kind of get a bit of a gut feel as to like, oh, is this off or not? Or is it kind of about right? And this just felt way off. And we said to our client, hey, look, this doesn't seem right. There's something's going on here. All of a sudden, there's credibility issues and it highlights risk and all of these kind of things. So look, to de-risk this, let's get it valued. And we got it valued. And my gut said to me when I looked at the numbers originally, I thought, man, this will come through somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million. So quite a contrast to the 3 point something that they're asking. They went ahead, we did the valuation. If memory serves me right, it came out at about 1.8 something or other, 1.8 million. Wow. Needless to say, there was a massive emotional attachment for our client who was looking at buying this business, and we'd started some of the due diligence, and ultimately they reflected on it. There was a few discussions around the dinner table at their house, and they withdrew. They walked away because you can't go and pay $3 million or over $3 million for something that only values up at under 2. There's so much of a gap. If they were asking 2 million and it valued up at 1.6, 1.8, yeah, you could play with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like buying a house, buying a business, you can negotiate. The beauty about buying a business is there's a lot you can negotiate with. The purchase price, how the purchase price is broken down. We haven't even got into the tangible and intangible asset components. There's then how it's paid for. It's unbelievable. There's so many different levers that you can play with, and everything's up to up for negotiation. How motivated is the vendor to be able to sell?
And they save themselves a bit of money there, right? Because they went down the valuation route and then could strip their emotion back and go, you know what, we're not even going to entertain paying 2 point something for this. Therefore, we don't need to do a stack of due diligence and incur legal fees and stuff like that as well to have all contracts reviewed to then go, well, we're not even going to, put an offer in on this anyway. So then they don't have to spend that money because they've basically come to the conclusion it's not worth this.
Yeah, because they've taken out insurance policy number one and that they claimed on it. Yeah. And it was like, that was however much they paid, let's say a couple of grand. They spent two grand to walk away from losing $3 million. I think that's a pretty good return on investment. And a lifetime, well, maybe not a lifetime, but years of shit if they were, hating it and what that would have done to them. Yeah, the other thing, just while it skips into my mind, and part of the reason why this valuation was a little bit cooked was, dare I say it, we're still in the post-COVID years, but COVID's being used in the financials, I think, to a degree to pump up numbers because businesses made some
big cash.
Big, just unbelievable amounts of cash during COVID. And there's been a block of businesses come to market where they're trying to capitalize on that post-COVID. Hey, we've done really well. But you fast forward, I reckon, to next year when some of these businesses want to sell and they've had a couple of years post-COVID as well as the COVID times, and it'll show the roller coaster. And it's like, you won't be able to sell it for what you thought it was worth in that immediate post-COVID environment because that was just an absolute blip. So what we do as part of the due diligence is when asking for the records from the vendor is we also want pre-COVID data to try and normalize what business looked like in a non-COVID environment.
Yeah, nice. Or, mate, you're giving away the secrets now.
Oh, mate, more than happy to just give it away. The value's in just translating it, mate.
Good man.
Yeah.
I guess it's like anything where you can be deep into your risk. So you can basically say, I don't need anyone on my team. I can go out there because there's nothing to stop that person paying $3 million for that business and buying it.
Yep, definitely.
Or you could then go the other way and get a team of people who can help you. But also the risk is that you get so far that way that you get analysis paralysis.
Yes,
where then you're like, the accountant's saying this, the valuation's saying this, the lawyer's saying this. I don't know which one to listen to. And like you said right at the start, it's not really anyone's role to tell you, like, go and do this. They're going to give you the information that you need to make a decision. But you've got to figure out where you sit on that risk scale.
Yeah, and I think understand the personalities of your advisors. Some of them might be more risk averse than others. So their advice is naturally going to follow their own mindset. And as you point out, at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to roll the dice as to going, well, all things considered, I want to roll with this. I know what my lawyers told me. I know what my accountants mean, but I back myself to be able to go through and do it. Or, as you said before, you don't have to do due diligence.
No.
You can just rock up, sign a sale and purchase agreement and go, I'm going to buy this business. Take my cash. And then however many days later, boom, you got the keys to a business. You're now a business owner. You need to go into problem-solving mode.
We've seen a business owner who got some fairly average due diligence for their first business purchase, right? And it wasn't done by us, just to be clear. But then the next two times they were basically like, well, I'm just going to buy this. We're just going to buy it. And so they didn't seek any advice, right?
No.
Yeah. And so they're at business purchase 3, but they're bolting businesses together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after their bad experience in round 1, they were happy to roll the dice more into 2 and 3. But it's an area where they've got very deep knowledge of whether it can actually add value to their business or not. But I think for a lot of people, it'd be very risky, much like buying a property or buying anything without de-risking it so that you've got the comfort. Because ultimately you don't want to be a loser who then goes below the line, blame, excuse, deny.
Yeah.
Because the only way you can truly know is with hindsight. But we don't get that. So you've got to then figure out what it is that you need to know to be able to make a decision and be comfortable with the decision that you make.
I think overall buying a business, it can be blimmin' exciting. But prepare for it to take a lot of time and, not only time in trying to find the business, but time of you as a prospective business owner investing and learning about what's going on, and a lot of reading. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think the final point would be from my side that every purchase is going to be completely different, and there are so many ways to do it. We haven't even touched on buying into a business that you're currently working at, for instance. So there are so many different moving parts to this that you should expect to try and get some good support around you. Otherwise, you're just not going to know what rocks to uncover to realise, geez, there wasn't just a crab under there, but there's a cheeky shark as well that's coming out. And they're going to gobble up everything. But we'll go a little bit deeper, mate, into some questions that people have asked, which I think will help us add some value in that space as well. If people want to get in touch, Phil at nextAdvisory.nz, jump over to the What's Next podcast, for instance, if you don't listen to that, but you want to start taking business more seriously. We have done, I think there's 400 and something podcasts there as well for people, mate.
I've added up quickly.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask right at the start, how annoying is it for you to have to put up with me, mate, for the last 6 to 7 years and do those 400 podcasts?
Mate, oh, jeez. I've got a really bad drinking habit that I haven't told you about.
Yeah, okay.
And I've got this pillow at home that is really consistently wet because I cry into it.
Yeah, each night. Tough out here.
Hey, one thing I was going to add, gee, my mind just jumps around, is when buying a business, we should have talked about this earlier on, is you can either do a share sale or an asset sale.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to do that now or in the Q&A?
Let's do that in the Q&A.
Okay.
I think this gives people a good insight as to how tangential we can be. If you do listen to the News podcast, you'll know. But we've tried to be very on bloody,
Yeah, Phil was told off before coming on. Focus. This.
Otherwise, we'll be off on Taylor Swift. We'll be doing all sorts of shit. But again, it just shows how broad-ranging this topic is because there is so much to it. So again, people are going to have to go out there and start doing some of that basic learning if it is something that they want to do. Thank you for tuning in. Could you please leave a like, a subscribe, all of that stuff, especially if you're watching on YouTube, to help the algorithm grow over there. Enjoy that first episode, and there will be a part 2, so keep an eye out for that. Cheers, Phil, for your insight as always, mate.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure.